this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than just Peyton Manning. I'm also motivating Manning. When I say insurance, you say financial services. Insurance.
Financial services.
Insurance.
Financial services.
Now when I say nationwide, you say is both. Nationwide.
Is both.
Nationwide.
Is both.
For your insurance and financial needs, Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Investment Services Corporation, member FINRA, Columbus, Ohio.
This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Apple Card members can earn unlimited daily cash back on everyday purchases wherever they shop. This means you could be earning daily cash on just about anything, like a slice of pizza from your local pizza place or a latte from the corner coffee shop. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app to see your credit limit offer in minutes. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Terms and more at applecard.com.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharyson.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharyson in this episode 1065 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast.
Thank you doing it, and
My voice is still jacked up, so I'm going to save it as much as I can for these mailbag questions. I mean, I even had my son do the thanks for tuning in. So let's get right to it. The first question this week is from Patreon. It's from David. It says, is there a standard approach to limiting waiver wire / free agent activity for teams that are not in competition for a league championship? In our league, we have a mildly embarrassing reward for the team that comes in last place, so technically, everyone still has something to play for, even if they're not in the championship bracket. Thoughts? So I talk about this each year, but I got this question a few times this week. So let's just talk about it again so that we're all on the same page. I also think it's an interesting discussion. I think the common take for this from fantasy analysts is to say that only teams in the actual playoffs should be able to make moves off the waiver wire. And while I understand that stance, here's the counterpoint to that. Why should playoff teams have an easier time getting players off the waiver wire? To me, the best team should win the fantasy championship. I know we play in these single elimination tournaments, and it's not always going to be that way. That's fine. It's the same deal in the actual NFL. But I at least want those single elimination tournaments to be fair. And to me, the best teams, they're the ones who are most prepared for that stretch run. It's the teams who have the best rosters going in, not the ones who luck into a couple of running back injuries and get the handcuffs off the waiver wire going into week 17. Now, I know the other side of this argument is that the team should just plan ahead. Stash all the handcuffs. Make sure you're blocking your opponents. And that's all fair. I'm just saying, as a counterpoint, that I don't think this is as black and white as people make it seem. I see both sides of the argument. And that's especially true if the non-playoff teams are playing for something. Like if there's a punishment involved, yeah, I would want to be adding players off the waiver wire if I was playing for last place. How is that any different than the championship bracket? You're still playing for something. Generally, if my teams are out of the playoffs and there's nothing on the line, I'm not adding players to my teams. There's no reason to. It's kind of freeing knowing that there's one fewer league that I have to deal with, if I'm being honest. And that's probably the way that most leagues should act. If you're not playing for anything, then don't add anyone. If you are, then you should be able to add during the regular waivers. Now, if you're in a situation where maybe people are playing for something small, don't allow them to add players during the waiver period, but allow them to get guys in free agency once that period ends. But I did want to introduce the devil's advocate to all of that because I think there's something to be said about having an easier time getting the hot waiver ad for that week. And it's not talked about enough. It's at least something to think about. This next question is from Jeff H. It says, what do we do with Lamar Jackson? His potential upside is still leading to consistently high weekly rankings, but he just doesn't look right. For teams that have managed to make the playoffs or are on the cusp despite rostering Lamar, where do we go from here? I'm legitimately considering benching him for Jakobi Brissett for the rest of the season. So one thing I'll say, and maybe this isn't relevant, I don't know, but I'll often get questions like this where it's like, should I play this fringe player rest of season? And my answer is, why give yourself that problem to answer right now? Fantasy football is a weekly game. Take it week by week. I have no issue if you're worried about Lamar Jackson and you'd rather just use Jakobi Brissett this week, even in a tougher matchup, because he's been giving us really good fantasy production. But what if Lamar Jackson blows up this week against Pittsburgh? You're just going to start Jakobi Brissett rest of season because you said you would in week 14? If the question's about dropping Lamar Jackson, I would not do that. But I agree with you. He's not totally looking right. But Jackson could have had a much, much better outing last week in fantasy if not for a couple of things happening. Like the Isaiah Likely fumble or the pass interference call that doesn't always get called on Zay Flowers. What was good to see was that Lamar Jackson had 2 design rush attempts after having just 1 in the 2 prior games combined. And he was scrambling a little bit more too. The problem is that Pittsburgh has historically played him pretty well. So I think this week, there's just a ton of volatility. You have to ask yourself if you can handle that and if your team needs that. But I can tell you that I would not be dropping Lamar Jackson right now, even if he still hasn't looked 100% himself. And they get the Bengals and the Patriots in weeks 15 and 16. You wouldn't be very happy if someone else had Lamar Jackson in your fantasy playoff because you dropped him and then Lamar Jackson just goes off, because those are 2 very good matchups. So if you want to bench him this week, if you want to wait and see, I totally get that logic. I understand. But there's no chance that right now I would be dropping Lamar Jackson. This next question is from Twitter. It's from @TLWTravis. It says, in the playoffs and with bench room, what's your stance on having more than 1 quarterback and tight end? I currently have 3 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends. My wide receivers and running backs are strong. Tempted to drop someone like Rodriguez to add Fannin and play matchups with my tight ends. Free agents are bad. So I've heard different iterations to this over the last couple of weeks, and I think it just needs to be said. Guys, you got to do what you got to do during this time of year with your bench. In the early parts of the season, you want more running back and wide receiver flyers. That slowly shifts as you get closer to the playoffs. You want more insurance if you're a championship caliber team. You want more volatility if you're not. Having multiple onesies, quarterbacks, and tight ends, it's more of that insurance play, even if it means that you're blocking other teams. When you have an inferior team that's barely getting into the dance, you might want to go with more running back handcuffs of running backs that you don't have. Like get Blake Corum if you don't have Kyron Williams. I mean, you should have Blake Corum regardless. Or just get some wide receivers with upside, because those positions are objectively more important in fantasy football. But if you feel good about those important positions, then you need to do what you got to do at quarterback and tight end. I have multiple quarterbacks and tight ends in tons of my leagues. Rostering a lot of them not only gives you flexibility for that 3-week playoff run, but it can also block your opponents from streaming. So do as you wish. It's no big deal this time of year. This next question is also from Twitter. It's from @WhoDatSay9. It says, what is the playoff outlook for Jakobi Meyers? Parker Washington's injured, had 20% of slot snaps last week, and 94% route share, 26% target share. Seems like a ridiculously solid flex play at worst moving forward. Yeah, I agree. The more I've dug into Jakobi Meyers' profile and what he's done over the last few weeks, the more I like him. I talked about this on the Sleeper Show, but Meyers has seen target shares of 27%, 20%, and 24% over his last 3 games. He's seen 11, 15, and 21 PPR points. And over the last 2 weeks, he's had route shares of 91% and 94%. According to Fantasy Points data, Meyers has a 28% first read target share over his last 3 games. That's basically a top 20 number at wide receiver across the league during that time frame. And during those 3 weeks, only 5 wide receivers have more end zone targets. Now, Jacksonville does get Denver in week 16, so Meyers is going to be tougher to play in that matchup. And we'll see where Sauce Gardner is at when they face off in week 17. But at the very least, it's hard to not like him over the next 2 weeks against the Colts and the Jets, especially with his Parker Washington injury. Meyers feels pretty underrated right now. The last question this week is from Robot Randy on Blue Sky. It says, should Cam Moore dynasty managers be terrified, or can we comfortably blame the dog you-know-what ecosystem? So there are 2 levels to looking at something like this. One is to first analyze the player and assess a proper hit rate to that player's profile. I mean, you don't need an actual number. I just mean look at history, look at what the player's working with, maybe find some comps, and see what the odds are that he's going to actually pan out into some super usable fantasy asset. And then there's the cost element. A lot of times I'll still invest in draft players who I don't even love because the market doesn't love them either. Like, I didn't think Kyle Monangai was that great of a prospect. I still doubt he becomes like a true bell cow back, but he's definitely been really good, don't get me wrong. But I still drafted him in both Dynasty and redraft leagues and best ball leagues because the cost was nothing. And there were situational factors that were really working in his favor, like the system that he was in and the backfield competition that he had. So let's look at that first piece first. What has Cam Ward done, and have other quarterbacks in a similar boat taken the leap in future years? Let's just look simply at fantasy points per game. Ward's averaging 9.7 standard fantasy points per game right now, which is not great. We've had 49 rookie quarterbacks play 8 or more games since 2011, while also hitting 200 pass attempts. Now, looking at just points per game with those guys isn't super helpful because a lot of them played in games but didn't start, like Lamar Jackson, for example. So I looked at those 49 quarterbacks and found their points per game averages in games where they had 15 or more pass attempts during their rookie season. There were 4 quarterbacks who were under the 10 points per game mark: Bryce Young, Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace, Josh Rosen, and Blaine Gabbert. When you change that filter to 12 points per game, you add Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Kaiser, Mitch Trubisky, Derek Carr, Austin Davis, and Brandon Weeden. Right now, Cam Ward has an adjusted net yards per attempt rate of 4.0. Among rookie quarterbacks since 2011 with 200 pass attempts, so this ignores games played, so our sample's a little bit bigger, only Zach Wilson, Blake Bortles, Deshaun Kaiser, Bryce Young, Blaine Gabbert, Josh Rosen, and Jared Goff were worse. Right above Ward in that statistic is Spencer Rattler, Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Christian Ponder, and then Dwayne Haskins. And then right after that, you finally get Josh Allen, like a big hit. Now, I could do this for days. No matter how you slice it, no matter the metric you're looking at, Cam Ward is being placed with a bunch of busts because his numbers are just really bad right now. But yeah, you layer on the situation, which has been horrible, and you can at least excuse some of this play. My problem with this kind of thing is that generally speaking, and this isn't foolproof, but generally speaking, we learn more than we realize about a player after that player's rookie season. There are always going to be exceptions to that rule at every position. But we're just talking about odds here. And the odds that Cam Ward becomes some stud in fantasy football, they're not great, objectively. I think we can all agree on that. So what I really try to do in these situations is not allow these excuses, which are genuine excuses. He has not been in a good situation. But the excuses of supporting cast, of coaching, of situation, I try to not let those overshadow absolutely everything. If you want a really big breakdown of my thinking and philosophy on that, you can go back and listen to episode 990, which is titled The Gray Area of Fantasy Football. That's the now infamous episode where I talked about trading Rome Odunze essentially for Emeka Egbuka back in May. Because I was trying to look at the range of outcomes for Odunze, and I didn't simply want to give him all the benefit of the doubt. Like, you can almost think of it this way. Think of a scale of 0 to 100. 100 would mean that you're dismissing all rookie season production because of situation, because of environment. 0 means that you're dismissing none of it. You don't think circumstance matters at all. You don't want to be on either end of that range. You want to look at it like a slider. You look at all the individual things, how they were as prospects, what kind of teammates and support they had on the field, what kind of coaching they had, whether they had injuries, and you want to slide that closer and closer to the right number. There's no obvious formula for that. That's what makes fantasy football so awesome. We can use numbers, but we use numbers to guide us in the right direction, not to just give us every single answer. That's why this game is so awesome. But this little example is just help you visualize how this isn't some black and white thing. And I do think episode 990 walks through that process in more detail than I can today. But then on top of all that is the cost. And that's really what this comes down to. One of the issues that I have with quarterbacks in Dynasty, and we'll just talk Superflex here because they just don't matter nearly as much in a single quarterback league. But historically speaking, quarterbacks have maintained market value pretty well year over year in Dynasty. like from year 1 to year 2. Like if you just go look at Keep Trade Cut right now and you look at Cam Ward's dynasty value, he was QB 17 over the summer. He peaked at QB 14, but he was mostly QB 17, even a couple of weeks into the season. You know where he's at right now? He's a QB 21, which sure, that's not unfair, but he's literally had one of the worst rookie quarterback seasons statistically that we've seen in recent memory. And he's only lost 4 quarterback spots in value, depending on the time frame that you're looking at. I did an episode on this a while back, but this is not an uncommon thing that we see at the quarterback position. Managers are really patient with quarterbacks. I mean, they were patient with Kenny Pickett. He barely lost any value from his rookie season to his second season. And it wouldn't shock me at all that if in May, in June, we get a little bit of that Cam Ward hype train going and his value goes even further north. It gets even better. So from that perspective, I do think you're going to be better off selling this kind of player than buying him. That doesn't mean that I'm like a Cam Ward hater or that I think there's a 0% chance that he becomes something. Fantasy football, though, is not real football. We can make moves all the time and capitalize to make our rosters better. And I'd much rather sell early than late with an asset like this. Because if he does go the direction that most quarterbacks with his numbers go, regardless of situation, if he goes in that direction, he's going to look a lot worse in the dynasty market this time next year. At the end of the day, this is all a probability-driven game. We're playing the odds. Nothing in fantasy football is certain, but if you play the odds correctly, you're going to win out in the long run. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribe to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are budgeting for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Seriously, guys, thank you so much for putting up with my voice this week. I greatly appreciate it. It's just as annoying for me as it is for you, I promise you. Later today, you're going to hear a Late Round Perspectives episode, and then the Late Round Fantasy Football show will be live at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then obviously that'll drop in the feed tomorrow morning. Appreciate all of you guys. Good luck in Week 14.
Whether you're kicking off a campaign, gearing up for an event, or suiting up your team, 4imprint has the promo products to move your brand down the field. With thousands of customizable options like premium apparel, drinkware, tech totes, and giveaways, it's easy to score fan favorites that deliver impact. You'll get expert support, speedy delivery, and their 360-degree guarantee, so you can be 4imprint certain your order arrives exactly right on time. Explore more at 4imprint.com.
4imprint, for certain.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parm delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.